Welcome back, guys. I will be going through the refs and the DOM advanced guide, refs and the DOM from the advanced guide. I will go through it step by step. So I'm also learning React. So this is a faster way to learn React. So nothing like live learning and live coding. So I'll go through this section now. So let me see what they have to say about refs and DOM. So in a typical React app, they're saying um, React data flow. In a typical React data flow, props are the only way parent components interact with their children. So they're saying to modify a child, you re-render it with new props. One second, let me close the shutter. Sorry about that. So it's much quieter now. So in a typical React data flow, as I was saying, props are the only way parent components interact with their children. So to modify a child, you basically re-render it with new props. So that's how you re-render. So if you modify, yep. So however, there are a few cases where you need to imperatively modify a child outside the typical data flow. The child to be modified could be an instance of a React component, or it could be a DOM element. For both these cases, React provides an escape hatch. Looks like in some instances, we will have to modify the child imperatively. So imperatively means using JavaScript code directly. They're saying we'll have to do it outside of the typical data flow. That means sending the properties from parent to child. So looks like React provides a way to imperatively change. That means using code, we can change the property of a child element without passing it a property and re-rendering it. So let's see how that can be done. So when to use refs. So there are few good use cases for refs. Managing focus, text selection, or media playback. Triggering imperative animations, integrating with third-party DOM libraries. Avoid using refs for anything that can be done declaratively. For example, instead of exposing open and close methods on a dialog, pass an isOpen prop to it. Okay. So they're saying use refs only in a few cases, like managing focus, text selection, or media playback. Triggering imperative animations. So looks like if you want to trigger an animation using JavaScript code, then do it. And integrating with third-party DOM libraries. So if you have to integrate with some third-party DOM libraries, I don't know what instances they would be, but looks like they're saying you can use refs. They're saying avoid using refs for anything that can be done declaratively. So if there is a way to do it declaratively, then they're saying do it declaratively. They're also saying avoid exposing methods like open and close. Instead, they're saying do it by setting a property like isOpen. don't overuse refs. So your first inclination may be to use refs to make things happen in your app. If this is the case, take a moment and think more critically about where state should be owned in the component hierarchy. So they're saying don't overuse refs, which is known. So it looks like it's not a pattern that you want to use for use it everywhere. So it's not a good practice to use refs everywhere. So use it sparingly is what they're saying. Often it becomes clear that the proper place to own that state is at a higher level in the hierarchy. See the lifting state up guide for examples of this. So that we already went through. I think the lifting state up is in the normal documentation. It's, you don't have to look at the advanced one. So let me make this a little bigger. Okay. You can see more now. So let me make the font a little bigger also. Okay. So adding a ref to a DOM, React supports a special attribute. So they're saying don't overuse refs, which we already talked about, and then adding a ref to a DOM element. React supports a special attribute that you can attach to any component. The ref attribute takes a callback function. The callback will be executed immediately after the component is mounted or unmounted. When the ref attribute is used on an HTML element, the ref callback receives the underlying DOM element as its argument. So it looks like the callback function that you specify in the ref attribute receives the DOM element itself as its argument. For example, this code uses the ref callback to store a reference to a DOM node. So they have some sample code here. So let's see, where is the ref attribute here? Yeah, if you see the ref attribute, so it takes the element itself in its callback. The callback's argument is the element itself in this case, which is nothing but this one. So let's say at a high level, that's what it's saying, but let's look at the entire component. So if you look at it, I think it's saying he's creating a React component called custom text input. And then he's doing something like this. And then, yeah, focus is, yeah, the focus method is called in this case. Yeah, so it will put focus to this text input element. Anyway, so ref callback. I don't know what is the use of something like this here. So looks like here they defined a button. When the button is clicked, we are calling the this.focus method, and the this.focus is doing nothing but it's setting focus. Okay, so it's doing nothing but setting focus, but I don't understand what they're talking about here. They're saying React will call the ref callback with the DOM element when the component mounts, and call it with null when it unmounts. Okay, but how does that help? So this dot text input, we are assigning it input. But what is input? Okay. So React will call the ref callback with the DOM element when the component mounts, and call it with null when it unmounts. Using the ref callback just to set a property on the class is a common pattern for accessing DOM elements. So this preferred way, the preferred way to set the property in the ref callback, like in the above example, there is even a shorter way to write it. Ref equals input. Okay, we understand that. I don't know what we are doing. So we are assigning. So this one is the input element itself. We got the input element. We are saying this dot text input. Okay, so we are basically getting. Okay. We are referring to the DOM element. So we have access to. I wonder if we give it an ID. I wonder if we give it an ID, if we can't access it. Why can't we give an ID to this input element and then use something like document.get element by ID, and then get the element's ID, and then call focus on that element? I don't know why we have to do something like this using ref. Is there a better way? I mean, is there a get element by ID way of doing it? If there is one, why not use that over something like this? Anyway, so I'm sure they'll talk about it somewhere else. So adding a ref to a class component. So I think here they're extending another element called autofocus text. Autofocus text input. I mean, it extends this React.component, and then again, component, as soon as the component mounts, looks like they're trying to set focus. Okay, so when they're trying to render a custom text input React component, we are getting we are setting a property. So basically, we are getting the element itself. We are storing this custom text input element itself in a property of its parent element, in this case autofocus text input. Autofocus text input has a text input property. Looks like we are storing custom text input in this text input property as soon as it's rendered. Note that this only works if custom text input is declared as a class. Okay. So looks like custom text input has to be declared as a class using this syntax. So does that mean I can't use a function React component, a React component that starts with a function keyword? I don't know. Or maybe they're talking about it below here. Okay. So refs and functional components. You may not use the ref attribute on functional components because they don't have instances. Okay. So whatever we talked about earlier, so I think this one is proof of that, I guess. Looks like my functional component is a functional React component. So basically, a functional React component, you cannot, this will not, a ref cannot be used on functional components, is what they're saying. You should convert the component to a class if you need a ref to it, just like you do when you need lifecycle methods or state. Okay. You can, however, use ref attribute inside a functional component as long as you refer to a DOM element or class component. Okay. So they're saying we can still use the ref attribute inside a functional component as long as it uses, as long as you refer to a DOM element. By DOM element, I'm guessing it's a HTML5 element. If we use that, then we can use the ref attribute, or the ref attribute can be used inside functional component if it is a class-based component, class-based React component. I don't know if they have examples. Let me see. So here, if you see function custom text input props, so they're defining a function. Oh, okay. So this function, so there is a functional component. Inside this functional component, let's see what they're doing. So here, this is a simple HTML5 element. Here they're saying you can use ref because you're referring to a standard HTML5 element. And they're saying you could do the same thing if you can use ref inside a functional component if this is either HTML5, if it's a HTML5 element, or a React component that's created using class. Understood? So exposing DOM refs to parent components. In rare cases, you might want to have access to a child's DOM node from a parent component. In rare cases, you might want to have access to a child's DOM node from a parent component. This is generally not recommended because it breaks component encapsulation. But it can occasionally be useful for triggering focus or measuring size or position of a child DOM node. While you could add a ref to the child component, this is not an ideal situation, as you would only get a component instance rather than a DOM node. Additionally, this won't work with functional components. Instead, in such cases, we recommend exposing a special prop on the child. The child would take a function prop with an arbitrary name, example input ref, and attach it to the DOM node as a ref attribute. This lets the parent pass its ref callback to the child's DOM node through the component in the middle. This works both for classes and for functional components. So let's see how this works. This they're saying that input ref. So while you could add a ref to the child component, this is not an ideal solution, as you would only get a component instance rather than a DOM node. Okay, so we don't want a DOM. We don't want a component instance. So if you use the ref, we get a component instance, not access to the DOM node itself. Additionally, this won't work with functional components. Looks like this will not even work with functional components, because with functional components, I cannot use ref. Instead, in such cases, we recommend exposing a special property on the child. The child would take a function property. So it looks like we have to expose a special property on the child, and the child, that property would take a function, a special property, a special function property with an arbitrary name. I think they gave name as input ref, and attach it to the DOM node as a ref attribute. Okay. So this lets the parent here, this lets the parent. So here we are saying input ref is going to actually, we are passing, so input ref is going to call a function. So input ref, let me understand what they're doing here. So input ref is a property. I thought ref calls okay. So this is a pretty convoluted way of doing it, but so basically what's happening here is, as you can see, input ref is nothing but a function that is expecting an argument, an element argument, and then when that callback function is called, it is going ahead and setting input element to the element that was passed as the argument to the callback. So when we do this custom text input, we're calling it with a property of input ref. It goes here, and ref is nothing but ref when we assign a function to ref. Actually, ref calls a callback function with the argument of the callback function is the element itself. In this case, it will pass this div to this function. So it will come here. So basically, div will come here, and then this dot input element will be assigned the div element, and this dot input element is a property of this parent. So anyway, a convoluted way of doing it. I wonder if there are better ways of doing it. In the example above, parent passes its ref callback as an input ref property to the custom input, and the custom input passes the same function as a special ref attribute to the input. As a result, this dot input element in parent will be set to the DOM node corresponding to the input element in custom text input. Okay. Oh, sorry. I think this is actually the element. So actually, ref is actually passing this input element as an argument to this callback. So input will be passed here, and basically this dot input element will get the input element from custom text input. So the parent has access to the child element's input element. Custom text input is nothing but the child element here. Note that the name of the input ref prop in the above example has no special meaning, as it is a regular component prop. However, using the ref attribute on input itself is important, as it tells React to attach a ref to the DOM node. Okay. This works even though custom text input is a functional component. Unlike the special ref attribute, which can only be specified for DOM elements and for class components, there are no restrictions on regular component props like input ref. Okay. So what he's saying is, I think here, this is a functional component. So we cannot use the ref attribute, but you can always have custom properties like input ref. Input ref is not a reserved word in React. So that input ref is a user-defined property. So you could have that, but we cannot use ref. You can't use ref with functional components. So, but there is one way of getting around it. Instead of getting around it, I would rather use a class-based React component. I don't know why we would want to use a simple function-based React component. I don't know what additional things it will buy us. Will the code footprint be smaller if we use a functional React component? Don't know. Maybe the code footprint will be smaller. But anyway, so if coming back to this function custom blah 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 parent grandparent, okay. So they defined a parent and a grandparent also. So the grandparent again, parent does it have input ref? Okay. I wonder where this is defined. So let's see in the previous one, where was it defined? Okay, it's defined here itself. So, oh, it's defined here. Okay. So they're doing the same thing. They're saying parent has a property called input ref, and it's nothing but a callback function. So the callback function has an argument which is element, which is of type, I think it's a DOM node. And then we are assigning grandparent's input element to the DOM node. So when this gets called, the control will go to, from grandparent, it will go to parent. And then inside parent, we are calling this custom text input. We are passing whatever we got back, that anonymous callback function. Oh, sorry, the anonymous callback function, which takes one argument. We are saying, hey, pass it on to custom input. And from custom input, it goes here. When it goes here, ref is sending this input element as the argument, then from there it comes here, and from here it's coming here. So this EL will be nothing but input. So let's see if our theory is correct. Here the ref callback is first specified by grandparent. It is passed to the parent as a regular property, input ref, and the parent passes it to the custom text input as a property too. Finally, the custom text input reads the input ref property and attaches the passed function as a ref attribute to the input. As a result, this dot input element in grandparent will be a set of DOM node corresponding to the input element in custom text input. Yep, that's what we said. All things considered, we advise against exposing DOM nodes whenever possible. Understood? So they're saying this should be an exception. This can be useful escape hatch. Note that this approach requires you to add some code to the child component. If you have absolutely no control over the child component implementation, your last option is to use find DOM node, but it is discouraged. Okay. Legacy API string refs. If you worked with React before, you might be familiar with an older API where the ref attribute is a string, like text input, and the DOM node is accessed by this refs.text input. We advise against it because string refs have some issues, are considered legacy, and are likely to be removed in one of the future releases. So basically, don't use something like this, is what they're saying. Caveats in the ref callback. If the ref callback is defined as an inline function, it will get called twice during updates. First with null, and then again with the DOM element. This is because a new instance of the function is created with each render. So React needs to clear the old ref and set up the new one. You can avoid this by defining the ref callback as a bound method on the class. But note that it shouldn't matter in most cases. Okay. Didn't understand this fully, but looks like okay. So next one is uncontrolled components. So we'll go through the uncontrolled components. Let me take a few minutes break. Then I'll get back to uncontrolled components.